So welcome back, everyone, and join me in welcoming Tara Toft and her colleagues from Sandusky City Schools, who are here to continue our conversation about social and emotional supports for gifted families.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. As Sarah mentioned, we are all from Sandusky City Schools, so we're up right by Cedar Point, if anyone is familiar. I am the principal at the Regional Center for Arts and Academic Studies, and I also serve as the coordinator for our district. And I'm joined by Joe Januzzi, who is a social worker and psychologist at the middle and high school in our district. And then I also have Sarah Kea with us. She is a social worker, and Morgan Britcher, also another social worker, and they really tag team throughout the district. Morgan focuses a little bit more on the little people, but they both tag team everywhere. So I think that suffice it to say that, Amber really presented a lot of great information that started us on a very solid footing, I guess, here. I'm going to share my screen and get presenting here. All right. So a little something to know about four of us. We actually just presented a gifted family focus workshop for parents in our district last Monday on perfectionism and pressure. So this has been a long time coming, but our first official workshop got underway on Monday last week. And we focus on this area because Regional Center is one of the only full day gifted services that I know of in our region. We opened our doors in 2013, and we offered full day gifted services to students identified in areas of reading, math, and or superior cognitive ability in grades 4 through 6. We had 76 students, 4 teachers, and we hit the ground running there. And that was the extent of our gifted services for the entire district. And then the following year, in 2014, we expanded to 3rd grade and then also pushed into the middle school, where we clustered our students there. And in 2015, we pushed into 8th grade with those clusters, but then also looked at our high school services and made sure that we had some good gifted offerings for our students up through 12th grade. In 2018, we added gifted clusters at 1st and 2nd grade. So, now we had 1st through 12th all receiving services throughout our district in various buildings. And last year, in the middle of a pandemic, we moved to a different building. And then we also added gifted services in the area of arts. So, let it not be said that we didn't take on something really big during the pandemic. So a lot better than just making sourdough bread. I think that was the big thing during the pandemic. Everyone made sourdough. So I am going to turn this over to Joe, who can give you a little background on why we came up with this topic and why we really pushed for perfectionism and pressure as our first workshop.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Tara. So really what had happened was probably about 3 years ago, just in working with our students. So I'm at the middle school and high school primarily, and really in working with a lot of our high school students, I started getting referrals and concerns for just a lot of anxiety, depression pertaining to workload, and kind of like the pressure of having to perform academically. And then it was also coming that I was seeing a lot of suicide ideation. And so I was seeing a lot of just observing a lot of emotional and behavioral changes kind of in our identified gifted students. So, it was something that was more than just like a single instance. It was becoming more of a trend, I would say. And so it was more of a coincidence in seeing these things. And then kind of digging into it further, we were seeing a lot of concerns as students were transitioning into different grade bands and levels. So going from our 3 to 6 regional center and then going to middle school, we started kind of seeing also some concerns in the increase in anxiety, and then also in the transition from middle school to high school. So seeing those increased anxiety, depression, and then also, especially as they were progressing on by grade level, we were also seeing decrease in their motivation with school. Just going off of that same idea, um, it was really just looking a lot at our students who were, again, identified as gifted, that were having these mental health concerns. And I remember I even kind of reached out to Tara because even like, me myself, sometimes the gifted population kind of just, you don't really recognize or think about them in a way that you would with some of our other like students who are presenting with different issues. I think, I had to educate myself a lot on gifted students because you just generally think, they're doing well academically, they're highly intelligent, and you really don't think about all of the stress and emotional difficulties and challenges that they present with. And so it just caused to kind of dig a little bit further. So I reached out to Tara just for any supports that she may have to try to support in the present moment with these students, but also to look at, some preventative measures, and also to just dig a little deeper as to why this was happening. What's interesting is we always are kind of looking at data, and we talk about that a lot in schools, educationally, with standardized tests, everything. And professionally and personally, I think sometimes we look at that a little bit too much, but we also need it though to make informed decisions. But the data for this was really those one-on-one interactions with these students. It wasn't anything that, you were seeing through testing. It was just something that we were seeing through reports by these students, and that they were, it was that one-on-one sit down with a student where I was really kind of feeling like this is a high concern, and their narrative, I guess, expressions and experiences themselves of what they were sharing openly was really indicative of a serious concern that we were having with our students who were these high achieving, students. So again, we were just really trying to look into the why.
So in order to kind of get a better grasp on the why, we created 3 different surveys that we kind of sent out. The ones we're mostly going to be talking about within this presentation is our student surveys. So we kind of popped into a couple different classrooms, actually all the classrooms, and we kind of explained to the students that we were going to kind of have them fill out the survey that asked them questions on a Likert scale. And as we collected the data and started analyzing it, I apologize for my dog. As the students got older, we noticed that there was a trend that the at-risk nature of it increased for perfectionism and pressure, and their kind of coping skills were a little bit questionable. As Joe was saying, as interviewing them and talking with them, a lot of them were able to identify a lot of coping skills, but weren't entirely sure in how to utilize them in their day-to-day lives or kind of when they're going through a crisis. So we noticed that social stress and thoughts of perfectionism increased as the students got older, just because I feel in talking with them, they were able to kind of grasp more on what's going on, kind of the pressures of when you get older, as Joe will probably talk about. When they get to high school, they have those thoughts of like, oh, what am I going to do for college? And all of these things. So the older they got, those thoughts of perfectionism seem to increase. Also within our surveys, the students did report having great relationships with family and friends, and looking at that on school psych, school social work, and the principal's aspect, that's a really good thing to see because they know that they have friends and family that they can rely on when they are going through a hard time. Although we did notice our 4th grade students were at a highest risk of perfectionism and related behaviors. In talking with some of the 4th graders, in my opinion, and in talking with the ones that I did, it kind of seemed like they were a little bit older. They kind of knew that their expectations were increased than it was in maybe in 3rd grade if they weren't at the regional center to begin with in 3rd grade. So I believe that as they got older and in fourth grade, they kind of realized that, oh, I'm labeled gifted. There may be some higher expectations of me, and that could have led to some of the feelings of perfectionism kind of came from and stemmed from. But the next couple slides, Joe's going to go through these beautiful surveys that he made to kind of go through that data that we collected.
So just to preface as well, and I guess going off of the idea of perfectionism, these surveys are by no means perfect. We recognize this concern, and we kind of just went with a sense of urgency to try and figure out what we could do to identify where it was coming from and then what could be done. And we wanted to look at where we could pinpoint and really our services and what we, trying to find that starting point. So I do want to point that out, is that, certainly the surveys that we provided were not perfect by any means, but it gave us a starting point for conversation to look at trends and see, where we were really seeing serious concerns. So back kind of in the winter of last school year, we sent out our survey, and we looked at the different grade levels. So the top here is our 3 to 5, and you can see, so anywhere where you see red really indicates that there was a level of concern. Gray is neutral. They didn't really give like a response indicating a positive or negative response. And then blue is a positive response. So basically looking at this, third grade, you see the most blue per se, right? So you see that they were generally feeling most positive about not having a lot of feelings of perfectionism. But as you look and you continue going from third, fourth, fifth, and especially down into sixth, seventh, eighth, the red increases, and we're seeing that feeling of perfectionism increases. So that was a big concern for us, especially looking at, those grade levels. And then as we continue on, we also looked at pressure, and the trend is generally the same. The data is important. Again, I don't want to go too in depth into the data, only because we want to focus more on what we're going to do about it. But just to give, a look as to what we were seeing, it's the same theme with the pressure. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means, because pressure has a lot of layers to it, whether it be from family, whether it be from education, the teachers, whether it be internal pressure, whether it be peer or social pressure. There's a lot of elements that contribute to that. I will say most of it really was internalized pressure, just their own thoughts and feelings that were really creating this pressure within them. And then a lot of it also was social in comparison to others. But as you can see, that pressure was increased as well, especially in your middle school. So last school year, we only were able to do 3 through 8th. And then as we went into this fall and this school year, well, and just I guess so going into this slide really quickly before I go into this school year, this also breaks down the questions as well, like what we were looking at. So you can see in regards to perfectionism, I often think I should have done better than I did. You can see the green there indicates that they agreed, and this is our overall responses. So this right now isn't broken down by grade level. This was overall our responses from, I want to say 3 to 12 on these bar graphs. But really this slide is nice because it just shows you what the questions are, and then you can kind of get an idea of what the responses were. So I become sad, angry, or disappointed in myself if I make a mistake. I'm unhappy if anything I do is average. I feel my best is good enough. And so there's also some very positive responses in there as well. It's nice to see, that there is a high level of strongly agreeing with, like, I feel my best is good enough. That's really what we want to emphasize, is that students, we just want them to do their best and reach the best possible version of themselves that they can be. And then just kind of going along, you can see too, as relates to pressure, everyone expects me to be perfect, looking more at social pressure. I feel that mistakes are not okay. I feel I must always be the best. I feel my success is not good enough for others. And so again, you can kind of see what we broke down. And this again was everybody, not necessarily broken down by grade level. So going in then to the next slide, which breaks it down by grade level, you can see here, so this is our 3 to 6 data from this fall. And with perfectionism, we had some very positive responses. Our 3rd and 4th grade provided positive responses to that. 5th grade, you see an increase. And then 6th grade, again, we're looking kind of a little bit more into some more of those positive responses as it relates to pressure, but still that increase from third to fourth into those levels. But then what we really see some concerns is looking at our middle school through high school. So breaking this down further and going by grade level, you also see the grays increase, so your neutral responses. And in following up with some students and asking them about the surveys and why, you know, one would provide a neutral response, I thought it was really interesting that, you know, they basically indicated when they provide a neutral response, they felt bad or they felt like it was the wrong answer to give a negative depiction, if that makes sense. So they just felt like neutral was the best bet. They didn't want to say that they felt or had a negative feeling. So neutral was like their safe zone for that. So we can generally assume the gray or the neutral response is really more indicative of that red area. And the most concerning in this data is if you look at 11th grade for us, is there was really no positive responses as it relates to perfectionism. A lot of them were feeling those responses and that thought and emotion related to perfectionism. And in some of the narrative interviews and interactions with the students, they did indicate 11th grade is just a really, really difficult year. And if you think about why that is, I mean, that's when you have a lot of your college prep, your test scores become very, very important. And you just start to feel a little bit more of, I have to be the best. I have to be perfect. They start to compete too for the top spot in the class. And that it just becomes a lot more of a concern as they increase, you know, through grade level. And then looking further into the pressure piece, the trend in the data kind of remains consistent. So we see more positive responses in our 3 to 6. Our negative responses generally increase, you know, but we see, and going into the next slide, the similar idea, whereas we're looking into the secondary level, it's more of a significant concern. And I know we talked about the idea of pressure and where it comes from. High school, 11th grade is where also they really start to just feel like, are they really on the trajectory or the path that they want to be on? Are they really, you know, are they really where basically they feel like other people have wanted them to be? And that also is not just academic pressure, it's social pressure. You know, there is a level of emotional pressure as well as is stress. If I'm feeling stressed, I feel pressure that I shouldn't be feeling stressed because I'm gifted. I should be able to handle this. So any type of failure or perceived failure or mistake really weighs on them from a pressure standpoint, is maybe there's something wrong with me or I'm not adding up to where I feel like I should be. And that's a very, very highly concerning thought and feeling. And it's very worrisome and concerning to hear from students. And I just want to echo again, even as we're looking at these charts, the most impactful piece of this for me was the interviews and discussions with the students. I mean, that's really what sparked wanting to create this change and wanting to kind of dig deeper into this, because hearing students that you work with express, you know, that feeling of pressure, perfectionism, and then it leading to them having high levels of depression and anxiety, and then the thoughts and feelings of wanting to kill themselves or the suicidal ideation, it's a very scary thing. And it's just something that really, really, we obviously never, ever want to happen. And we never want our students to feel that way. So we really felt like a commitment was needed to this to really see what was going on.
So like I said earlier in the presentation, we did create 3 different surveys. So we created the family survey for parents, guardians, and any other family member that may know the student could kind of answer. This gave us a more holistic view on the child, because that's what our goal is here, just to kind of see from every aspect who interacts with the child, kind of what the child feels, what the family sees. And we also ask teachers to do the same thing, just to kind of get a greater picture of each student, to kind of see where the student feels they are, where the family sees they are, and where the school sees that they are as well.
Thanks, Morgan. So next, we've thrown out a lot of words about perfectionism, pressures, what those feelings might look like. So we're going to take a deeper look into how this manifests with our students, or what thoughts and feelings we might be looking for or noticing. So first, being concerned over making mistakes. And that's a great spectrum of what a mistake may look like. And that's a very subjective experience for what that might mean for each individual student. 2, having high personal standards and set expectations or standards for oneself. 3 is a very interesting one. So the perception of high parental or family criticism. So this is another unique experience for students. So whereas parents and families might not be indicating that performance is not up to standard or expectations are not being met, or that there's this element of criticism, the perception is there. So that perception versus reality balance for that student, whereas that experience might not be given from the parent or the family, they may feel that way. And that feeling and that experience is very real for them. 4, doubting the quality of one's actions. And this could be before an assignment's turned in. It could be something as small as a spelling test or a small project, or bigger tests and exams, which many of our students engage in multiple times throughout the year. And then 5, high preference for order and organization. And so moving in a little bit deeper with perfectionism and pressure, why the gifted? So 1, perfectionism and perfection is an abstract concept. So it's something very difficult. It's not defined. It's not concrete. It's not black and white. It's a very individualized and subjective concept. 2, asynchronous development. So something we've been discussing, and as a team and as a district, and today with all of you, students are developing cognitively ahead of where emotionally they're at. So emotional maturity is going to be at 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade. But cognitively, we're ahead of that. We often assume, and we may overlook without intending to, or without that intention or purpose being there, but making that natural assumption that if my child is gifted, or if the student is gifted intellectually, that means that emotionally they're at the same level. And so it's been definitely an interesting experience for us, because I think we're all guilty of having that thought or just making that assumption at times. And so that's something that definitely drives our purpose in supporting our students holistically. 3, students might relate better to older, more mature people and see their skill levels as ideal. 4, our students might often master a task and a skill on the first attempt. Naturally, the only way to go is up. So that self-drive to continue to achieve. 5, our students may crave challenge and stimulation. Easy work can get complicated. So sometimes the most simple things are the most difficult. And then 6, distortion of the drive for self-perfection. So it's evolution. And we want to be careful to say that being driven and motivated to achieve and to succeed and to have these great accomplishments are all great things. We want all of our students to achieve. We're looking at that balance between achievement, and then before that balance kind of tilts a little bit more to the side of driving for perfection and something that's unattainable. Oh, that was a good transition to this slide. So our feelings may drive the academic success. So motivation and all of these qualities can be a positive thing too. And our students are extremely talented and gifted and have so many strengths that drive their academic success. However, it goes into that balance again of when those feelings continue to evolve and then grow into more anxious feelings. If I don't achieve at this level, it might mean that I'm not good at this, or that I'm not smart. So then you transition into more distorted thinking and thoughts of self, which again takes us into our all or nothing thinking patterns, or that dichotomous thought. So I am either perfect or I'm worthless. So there's no in between. And some of our students did disclose feelings that if I'm not perfect, it means I'm not good at anything, or I'm either good at everything or I'm good at nothing. So finding that balance and the beauty of making mistakes and learning through the journey of failure and success, and being able to balance that is definitely a lesson and qualities that we want to instill and supports with our students. So again, feeling that my best is not good enough if it's not perfect. So a lot of our students would say, is anyone perfect? Am I perfect? No, of course not. But then having that moment of realization with that student, okay, well, let's discuss, where we've been feeling or where our thoughts have been, and then seeing that comparison of, okay, maybe I am expecting myself to be perfect, and maybe this is how it's presenting. So students don't always have the language or the verbiage to communicate that they might be feeling anxious or they might be having these thoughts. It's their experience feels very typical to them and very normal because you live with these thoughts. You go to school every day and have these thoughts. It's normal. So being able to have that conversation.
That kind of brings us back to what Sarah said earlier, where it's like cognitively, they're so far ahead of like maybe their grade is, but that's kind of where we see the emotional aspect of them still being in that third grade level where they're still learning how to name their feelings.
Absolutely. And again, it all comes down to that balance of whether or not my performance is overdriving the balance of life and learning. And to reiterate again, our students are incredible and they're talented in so many different ways with so many different talents. And so we will always want to capitalize on those strengths too. But it's important that we're shifting our focus to make sure that they're supported to be able to enjoy learning all the way from elementary school or when they're first identified as gifted, and then up into the middle and high school levels.
So the next part that we're going to move into is really just how you can help your child. And there were several things that Amber had mentioned in her time with us that really resonate with a lot of what we're going to share here too. That notion that asynchrony and even some of the aspects of perfectionism, they're not negative in and of themselves. It's when they kind of take over and that it becomes not balanced anymore that we find that we need to kind of help eliminate those social emotional roadblocks that she had talked about as well. So one of the things is something you're already doing because you're here with us today, you're educating yourself, and then you can take this to your child about these symptoms and the signs of perfectionistic thinking that might be tipping the scales and going to that area that makes it a roadblock for them instead of a help. And then, Amber also had mentioned setting those healthy routines, using those positive affirmations, trying to help retrain that self-talk that is just going a mile a minute sometimes in our brains, and especially in a gifted child's brain when they're perseverating on maybe the negative aspect of something. And then just check in with your child, really observe the changes in their behavior, observe kind of what's happening with them. Are they having some outbursts that aren't typical for them? Are they reacting to things that like, well, gosh, that never bothered you before, and now it is? There just might be some spillover that you could notice, and then have that conversation with them to figure it out. And have the open conversations about the stress and, embracing those mistakes, making the mistakes and learning from them, that whole growth mindset. And then look for the resources, look for the support, the helpers in the school and other parents, and, maybe work to help with some student mentoring relationships or even adult mentoring relationships for your child. And then as ourselves, as the adults, if we can model some healthy ways to really manage our own stress and teach those strategies and techniques to our students so that they can emulate them. Okay.
And then kind of going off of that too, so in regards to helping your child, look at, I guess, the environment or a climate that creates perfectionism. You definitely want to really, going off of some of those points from the last slide, and like Tara mentioned, you really want to make sure that we want the best out of each and every single opportunity and individual, but mistakes are okay. Those are something that we want to emphasize the effort, and learning, basically, over perfect scores and mastery. So that's really the biggest things we want to encourage and emphasize, that growth. And, this is really something I think that becomes tricky, especially in working even with our students here, is they're very much focused on the grade report, scores, A's versus a B. I mean, for some students, a B can be very devastating for what they would consider to be perfect. A's really emphasize for them what they feel is where they should be. However, all A's are not created equally. They're all not the same. And we would really rather have a hard fought B versus a, easy A. And so just looking again at that effort is really important. And I think, looking at this saying in particular, we really kind of want to get rid of this in our habits and communication. Good, better, best. Never let it rest until the good is better and the best. And it just goes back to the idea, it's not about being the best in comparison to others. It's about being the best, you yourself are capable of being, the effort, the giving your best effort, not necessarily the outcome.
Yeah, so one of the ways that we can help them through this is with a level strategy, and where we kind of give some words to the situations that we see and that we experience. So level 1 would really be something that, it's just something that has to be done. It doesn't necessarily have to be done so well. And a good example here would be like making the bed. As a mom myself, I just wanted my boys to pull the covers up and not have the pillows on the floor. Like, that's my definition of good enough, level 1 type of a thing. Level 2 task would be something that's worth doing just a little bit better. You're going to need a little bit more attention here. You might have some more criteria for the acceptable work than just having the pillows up off of the floor. So this might be, cleaning in a bathroom or something. Like, you actually have to take the time to wipe things down. I mean, there's a level of importance here of keeping people healthy and keeping things sanitized. So you're going to take a little more time there. A level 3 task would be just that, a little bit more than a level 2. You're going to take a little more time, a little more attention to that detail. So this might be washing the dishes, cleaning in the kitchen. Again, another sanitary area. And that's something that, like, we're going to be eating off of these plates again. Let's not have the food bits left on there. Let's, take a little extra time here and make sure that it's better. And then finally, a level 4, well, not finally, I guess we'll have a little more room down here. You're going to have something with a certain level of skill that's required here. So you're going to maybe have a bigger school project that you'll work on. You're going to need to chunk that down into smaller pieces, making sure that along the way you're putting it together into something that is better. And this is something that can really set a perfectionist over the edge and maybe make them not even want to try it, and then seem completely unmotivated because they just don't want to fail. And then finally, a level 5, and I'm not sure if you all can see that, but I'm going to move the pictures for me up top. This is something where you have higher levels of skill, higher importance for getting all of those details just right. I mean, this would be like, all right, brain surgery. I got to make sure that the doctor is going to have a lot of skill here. They need to make sure everything is perfect, or it could be critical. But here's the kicker. Not everything is level 5. And for a lot of our kids who are experiencing perfectionism at this really tough level of its manifestation, everything's a level 5. So everything is critical, and I just have to have it all perfect, when really, maybe are you treating this like it's a level 5 when really it's not? It's a good conversation to have with them. Okay. So another strategy that you can use with your kiddos, and really maybe with your spouse, who happens to also have some perfectionistic tendencies, would be the timing strategy. So, all tasks can be timed. And in a book that we used for some of these resources by Lisa Van Gemert, it's called Perfectionism. Here, I'll even hold this up for you. She likened this to her loathing for changing the sheets on a king size bed. And she decided that, since she's constantly struggling with having to do this, she timed it and took her all of about 7 minutes. So really, she was building it up in her head that it was a bigger deal than it really was. So once you do that, you can then, as a family, try and beat the timer and make it so that, this isn't high stakes. Like, no one's going to hurt because we don't beat the timer. So maybe we even set a go over limit. Maybe 10% of the overage. And then that way we can work from there to improve and cut that down to something that we agree upon, that maybe this task should take about this much time. And then the thing is, levels can shift. When I talked about a level 2 for cleaning the bathroom, some of you may have cringed, but we had 2 full bathrooms in our house growing up when I was raising my kids. I didn't go in their bathroom. There was no way that this mama was going to walk into that boy's bathroom because it was just clean enough for them. But when my parents came over, they had to make it grandma clean because grandma was probably going to use their bathroom. So they had to up that a little bit more to a level 3 or a level 4, when typically on a daily basis, it was about a level 2. Put your stuff away, wipe it off, make sure there's nothing, really visible and icky. And then have those conversations with your kids to agree upon those levels, because they might really be thinking, no, this is a level 4. And you can talk them off of that ledge, so to speak. Sorry, I was kicking that one over to Joe.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't get my mute to work for me for a minute. Okay, so one of the biggest things too is looking at, basically reflecting on opportunities and really, looking at even the idea of positive affirmations, but also just that positive self-talk, and then looking back on experiences is something that's a really good skill to have. And, when you set also like those goals, when you review those goals, it's basically all about, that caregiver grace and looking at, what was the process in getting those goals? And did we take the best steps that we could to achieve them? And reflecting back, what can we do differently? And then also like having an honest reflection about it. Like, are we looking at this as a level 4 when really it's only a level 2? So just trying to kind of really check and do those check-ins. Journaling is something also can be very helpful. And even, we say caregiver, teacher, another trusted adult, but it's also something that could even be with a peer or a network of other students as well. Just somebody who can relate, but then also, write back and then reflect back and share input. But it's always important that you also emphasize the positives in these interactions and taking all of those experiences and finding what was positive, what was a strength about it, and then what you can build on. And it's really the language that you use that's really important.
Right. And one of the things to remember is that the anxiety that we feel as a perfectionist at this level, it rarely comes from the actual task. It's really coming from that self-talk. It's coming from all of the script going on in my own head. And whether, like Sarah had said earlier, whether it's real or it's just perceived, that perception is my reality if that's what I keep feeling. My secretary actually uses her car time because her daughter is still young enough that she doesn't drive. And she's like, she's a captive audience. I use that time to really talk with her and try and work through some of these things, because she can often have these perfectionistic tendencies.
And with the information that we discussed, we also wanted to include just a snapshot of what our in-house supports are, or based off this information, what services and providers do we have in place to be able to address the needs of our student population. And so with all of our districts, we have our access to our school counselors, our school social workers, myself, Morgan, and Joe, and then also an educational or behavioral consultant. And together, those 3 systems have collaborated on a variety of supports that are implemented within the school. So one of those being our social emotional learning curriculum, which prioritizes early intervention in instructing and practicing skills at an early age, and then building on those at each grade level. So by the time we have a high school senior, they are prepared, ready to be a productive, happy, and healthy young adult. And so also with that, we have the benefit of having our school-based health clinic with Family Health Services, which is local to us, which provides a physical and behavioral health services for all of our students. So the physical health clinic is available for all students preschool through 12th grade. And this is all in light of identifying and addressing the needs of the whole child. And then also with that is our behavioral health services that can be provided to students grade 3 through 12, and hopefully to be expanding soon for all of our students.
So one thing too that we basically are also trying to initiate and use as a positive is creating a positive peer network. And this starts from like our high schoolers and basically utilizing them as positive peer, whether it be role models or a support system, and connecting them with students as they kind of enter the program, or looking at them, connecting them with like a third, fourth, fifth, or sixth grader, and helping with some of those critical transition periods, and providing their own advice, their own experiences, looking at it from a lens of they've been through a lot of what our elementary level and younger students are going through. So trying to help even modeling some of those strategies we talked about before was something that the students actually have kind of brought as well to our attention, is they really want that opportunity to do that. They wish that that was something they had when they were younger, and they found that that's something that they really think would be beneficial. And then also being able to advocate for each other and just show that what you're going through is something that, you're not feeling alone. And in some regard, also normalizing some of that stress, so it doesn't feel like you're a failure, and maybe we're not feeling like all that pressure is piling up, and that there's a group of students who are there to support you as you go through that. And so this is something though that we just kind of have started, and we share this with we share this at our last presentation, and we share it with, our parents and families. And all it is simple. Just we have a referral process, and then we kind of will connect the students on things that maybe they have similar interests with, and then from there, basically, kind of have them go through a process of staying in contact and communication and working together over the course of the year.
Speaking of, going over through the course of the year, we have additional gifted family focused workshops that are already planned. This is the address for our school. This is where the Regional Center for Arts and Academic Studies is located. We will be running them on these dates. We already did our October 11th session on perfectionism and pressure, but more of that student survey will be showing its face in these other subsequent presentations. So we not only looked at perfectionism and pressure, but there were 3 other areas that we had those questions that addressed things like coping strategies, relationships, and self-awareness and advocacy. So those are the next 3 sessions that we'll be sharing with our families. And you might notice here, it is after the MD Student Art Gallery opening. We have an art teacher that had retired from our district named Michelle Zemke. We have an art gallery in our building named after her, because it was her idea to add the arts back when we had started things off in 2013 with the academics. It just took us that long to make that happen. So we thought we would put these things together with the art show opening, and then we would also have the gifted family focus workshop on the same dates and kind of marry those 2 things. So I put this up here. I know that we have people from across the state of Ohio, but if anyone is in that area, you are welcome to email me, and my email will be on the last slide here. if you would like to join, you're welcome. These workshops are free. They are open to families, not just within our district, but also within our neighboring communities. So if anyone feels like driving to Sandusky, this is a great opportunity to do that. So.
And then lastly, with this slide, we just wanted to include some community supports, so including your behavioral health supports and then also social and community resources. So whereas these resources are local to us, I would encourage anyone listening in your region or your area I'd encourage you to reach out to social workers, school personnel, because it's very likely that any of the resources we have access to here, there's probably something similar in your area. So in addition to our behavioral health supports, our community resources, there's many unique resources that students and families have access to, whether it's your after school programs, your youth mentoring programs. From a community perspective, I know Joe works very hard in our in-house and our district mentoring program, after school, recreational, summer opportunities, any chance for a student to be social, and which is definitely something that after the last 18 months or so, those social interactions and just being around others, peers, adults is very important for our students. Or if it's something more specific, grief support. Project Noel is actually a local organization that services students and families impacted by the opioid crisis. And so I'd encourage you, if any of these resources might be of benefit to your student, to reach out to your local professionals and see what's near you. It's very likely that it's out there.
So I will ask our moderators if there are any questions for us in the chat that we can address and help people with.
Right now, I don't see any questions, Tara.
Okay. All right. Well, then this is your chance. So anyone in the audience, if you have anything you'd like to ask us directly, now's your opportunity.
We do have a question in the chat. First, thank you for this really helpful presentation. I love how you center the challenges that kids face over time and how they change over time. Curious, to what degree do you think that the perfectionism and self-inflicted pressure that you identify are driven by the label of gifted? Is this something that we are creating among our kids?
I think right now in the field of gifted, that is a big question. But I think that just as Amber had pointed out in the previous session, and I think a lot of our points as well, it's about having that conversation and helping them to understand that, helping them to know how to relate to people without being arrogant about it, and just fully understanding themselves and what that means for themselves, and how that's a benefit and not something to shy away from. Anyone else have a thought on that?
I think going off of that too, I think it's when we present them with the label, or we share with them that they've been identified, but also educating them more so on what that means, and looking more like kind of, I guess, maybe looking at it from a standpoint of, again, even though that maybe is a label or you're identified as this, it does not imply or indicate, any certainty. I mean, there's certain things that obviously each individual is unique regardless of what that identifier or label is. And I think one thing I will say that I think we really need to do better with is having those conversations with students, and those candid conversations, more so about what it means to be gifted. And I think that is really something that's really, really important with the identifying label as that.
Yeah. And I think along those lines, even having the conversation about what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that you are better than your peers. It just means that you learn differently, that you have certain strengths, but along with that, you also have some certain other opportunities for growth and some major needs to grow a little more in line with the way that you're learning to think, but emotionally, that you're going to have some challenges along the way, and it's okay. And here are some ways that we can help you through it.
It's a great question.
Thank you for your response. We're waiting for more questions to come in.
While we're waiting, this doesn't mean that we're out of time. We do still have a few more minutes set aside for questions, but I will put up our contact information so that you have some time to take that down. So you've got my email address is there, and then all of our phone numbers are there if you would have something specific that you would want to ask us later on. Now might be a really good time to point out as well that Morgan has a different last name on here than what she had when she was originally billed for today's event. Morgan got married last weekend and changed her name to Butcher. And fun fact, we found out we're basically sisters now. Yes. I know this is just going to be my favorite joke of all time, Morgan. Morgan actually married the brother-in-law of my sister-in-law. So we're just one big happy family.
That's awesome. Congratulations,
Right?
Morgan.
Thank you.
Welcome to married life, girl.
We do have a question that came in. Can you say a little more about some of the other sessions you're planning? I was especially curious about the one on self-awareness.
That will be our last one, the self-awareness and self-advocacy. Right now, that's planned to be the last. And really just based on the needs that we saw in the survey, we kind of put them in the order of importance. And that was why we started with perfectionism and pressure, because that was a really big need. So we'll go with coping skills next. That'll be one in December. And actually our behavior specialist, our behavior therapist has agreed to help us on that one as well. So that's going to be great. Chris Osterling will be helping us. And the one in February on Valentine's Day, that would be the one on relationships, rather fitting. And then we'll talk more about that self-awareness and advocacy. And with that, we'll be focusing on ways for students to really get in tune with themselves and understand their personal needs, and then to properly ask for that. Maybe properly isn't the right word. I think when Amber was talking about teaching them how to advocate, maybe to a teacher and say, I already know this and I would like to learn something different, instead of this is boring and, just kind of lashing out in the middle of a class. So we'll kind of focus on those different ways to approach advocacy for their needs. But they definitely have to understand themselves first. So it'll be a two-piece parts to that one. And like I said, you are more than welcome to email me if you plan to be in the area, in the Sandusky area, and would like to join for any of those.
Thank you, Tara. We're giving a couple more minutes to see if any other questions come in.
I was just going to check. I saw the 3 up at the chat, and I felt like I counted all of those, but just to be sure. I really want to thank Joe and Sarah and Morgan for taking this on with me. Been a really big thing to do in our district, and then to be able to bring it to everyone here today. And it's very rewarding work, but it's hard work. So I thank them all for that. And I thank OAGC and everyone for just welcoming us to talk about this really important topic.
It looks like we don't have any other questions coming in, but I wanted to thank you too. You are doing wonderful work up there.
Thanks. Our kids definitely deserve it. So makes it easy to take on the hard things when we see it helping them. All right, well, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, kick that back to OAGC land.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Tara. And yeah, I just want to second Kaylee's comment here. I think this work that you're doing is so important. And I think like just the act of doing the survey and caring enough to actually ask students how they're doing, and then to have those conversations with them to kind of dig in deeper, that's really important. So yeah, kudos to you all. I think it's just wonderful. Thank you everybody for joining us at Parent Day. These were just some great sessions. For those of you in the audience that would like to revisit pieces of the presentation, especially there were some resources offered and contacts. The link for the recorded sessions will be available in a few days. I think Ann Sheldon will send something out. And then finally, I just want to remind everybody to feel free to explore the parent page on the OAGC website. There are additional resources for parents on a couple of different areas. There's also information on the website overall about scholarships that you might want to share with your community. So just thank you again for coming and for making a great Parent Day. So enjoy the rest of your weekend.